Forget the romantic image of the family dog for a moment, or the tiny Frenchie sitting in someone's lap at a coffee shop. That version of the dog, the pampered, vaccinated, well-fed house pet, is a very modern, very wealthy world phenomenon. Depending on the region, somewhere between 70 and 80% of the world's dogs live free-ranging lives. They wander through villages, suburbs, and megacities without formal ownership. Some people feed them occasionally. Some people chase them away. Some adopt them temporarily. But they remain part of a massive global population of animals that survive in the margins of human civilization. In other words, the majority of dogs on this planet are street dogs. If you spend any time in Southeast Asia, which is where I live, I'm here in Vietnam, the reality becomes impossible to ignore. Here in Vietnam, street dogs are simply part of the daily environment. Like, I'll go out and I'll see them sleeping outside of noodle shops. They'll be curled up under plastic tables or just wandering through quiet residential alleys. Some clearly belong to someone because you can see like they, have their collars on. So, some of them belong to people, but others, they look more uncertain, they look thinner, they look dirtier, and they navigate the city through trial and error. They've learned when restaurants throw out scraps, which is pretty amazing to see. Like, you can just tell they know. It's crazy. You have to see it to know what I'm talking about, but they just know. They know what streets are safe. They know what streets are dangerous. They understand the rhythms of the city better than like any tourist ever would. Vietnam is just one small piece of a global story that stretches across continents. In India, street dogs are so common that entire neighborhoods develop informal relationships with them. In Mexico, packs roam the outskirts of cities and industrial zones. In Turkey, dogs have become a strange symbol of national identity and political controversy. In Romania, they spark one of the most bitter debates about animal rights in modern Europe. In Brazil, millions wander through urban neighborhoods, surviving off the leftovers of one of the world's biggest economies. In Thailand and the Philippines, temple dogs and market dogs form entire social ecosystems that exist just outside of human control. The scale of the phenomenon is staggering. In India alone, they may have over 60 million street dogs. Mexico's estimates range from 15 to 20 million. Brazilian likely has several million more. Romania once had hundreds of thousands roaming its capital city alone. Turkey's population is in the millions as well. And across southern Asia, from Thailand to Vietnam to the Philippines, street dogs are woven into everyday life so deeply that many locals barely notice them anymore. But the reality of street dogs forces us to confront a question that most people in wealthy countries rarely think about. What exactly is a dog supposed to be? In modern Western imagination, the answer seems obvious. Dogs are companions, they're pets, they're members of the household, but that idea is historically new. For most of human history, dogs were working animals. They guarded villages, hunted prey, and cleaned up scraps of food around human settlements. They lived close to people, but not necessarily inside homes. And when populations of dogs grew too large, humans controlled them through culling, relocation, or simply letting nature take its course. The street dog crisis exists largely because modern societies are caught between two competing ideas. On one hand, dogs are increasingly seen as emotional companions deserving protection and care. But on the other hand, large populations of free-roaming dogs can create serious problems. Disease transmissions, attacks on humans, ecological damage, and constant breeding cycles that produce more suffering animals. Nowhere is this tension more visible than in India. India has one of the largest street dog populations on Earth, and the relationship between humans and dogs there are complicated, deeply cultural, and fiercely debated. In many parts of India, street dogs are tolerated or even fed by local residents. Some communities view them as protectors that deter thieves or wild animals. Religious traditions also influence attitudes. Harming animals is considered morally wrong in many contexts, which complicates efforts to control dog populations. But India also reports thousands of dog bite incidents every year, which is crazy. And the country carries the world's highest burden of rabies deaths. Rabies is almost entirely preventable through vaccination, but controlling the spread requires large-scale vaccination and sterilization campaigns. For years, India has relied on a strategy called ABC, also known as animal birth control, where streets are captured, sterilized, vaccinated, and released back into the environment. The idea sounds humane on paper. In practice, it's incredibly difficult to execute at the scale required. Sterilizing millions of animals across the vast country requires enormous resources and coordination. When the programs fall short, the population simply just rebounds. Dogs reproduce quickly, and within a few years, entire areas can be repopulated with new litters. China represents a different kind of controversy. In many Chinese cities, street dogs exist alongside a growing middle class that increasingly embraces pet ownership. At the same time, China has regions where dog meat consumption remains part of the local culinary tradition. The annual Yulin Dog Meat Festival becomes internationally famous, sparking outrage from animal rights groups across the world. Yet within China itself, opinions are changing rapidly. Younger generations are far more likely to treat dogs as pets rather than livestock. Still, stray populations remain a huge issue in rural areas and rapid expanding cities. Urbanization has created vast spaces where abandoned dogs gather around markets, construction zones, and industrial areas. Some municipalities have attempted large-scale culling programs, which inevitably trigger international criticism. Others are experimenting with sterilization and adoption campaigns, but the challenge remains enormous. Mexico tells another version of the same story. Walk through the outskirts of many Mexican cities and you'll see dogs wandering through neighborhoods, often friendly but clearly surviving on scraps. Mexico's street dog population is estimated to be in the tens of millions. Some dogs form loose packs that roam vacant lots and highways. Others linger near food vendors, hoping for leftovers. Animal rescue groups across Mexico work tirelessly to sterilize and rehome dogs, but the numbers are just too overwhelming. Turkey might be the most fascinating case of all, right? Because unlike many other countries where stray dogs are removed or euthanized, Turkey has historically allowed them just to remain in the cities. In Istanbul, street dogs are almost part of the cultural fabric. Locals feed them, veterinarians tag them with ear markers after they sterilize them, and municipal governments provide basic medical care. Some dogs become minor celebrities in their own neighborhoods. But even in Turkey, the issue is far from settled. Recent years have seen some intense political battles over whether stray dogs should be relocated, confined to shelters, or left on the streets. Some citizens argue that dogs are just part of the country's heritage. Others point to attacks and traffic accidents as evidence that the current system is just unsustainable. Romania experienced one of the most dramatic street dog crises in Europe. After the fall of communism in the early 90s, economic upheaval and abandoned housing projects created ideal conditions for stray dogs to multiply. Bucharest became infamous for massive packs roaming the streets. At its peak, the city may have had over 100,000 stray dogs. Public opinion changed drastically after several high-profile attacks on children. The Romanian government eventually authorized widespread euthanasia programs, sparking outrage from international animal rights groups. Protests erupted across Europe, but Romanian officials argued that the safety of citizens had to come first. Brazil faces its own version of the problem. In sprawling cities like Rio or Sao Paulo, street dogs often live at the fringes of wealthy neighborhoods. Some are friendly, almost communal animals fed by residents. Others survive in harsher conditions around landfills and industrial zones. Brazil's animal rescue movement is vibrant and passionate, but the sheer scale of the problem makes progress slow. Meanwhile, in the Philippines and Thailand, street dogs are such a familiar sight that many locals barely register them anymore. Temple grounds often host entire communities of dogs, cared for informally by monks and volunteers. Tourists frequently encounter friendly strays near beaches and night markets, but behind that laid-back image lies the same difficult reality: unchecked breeding, disease risks, animals living short, difficult lives. One of the most controversial questions surrounding street dogs is ecological impact. In many parts of the world, free-ranging dogs hunt wildlife. Studies have shown that dogs can devastate local populations of birds, reptiles, and small mammals. On islands and in fragile ecosystems, they actually can become invasive predators. This puts conservationists in a very difficult position because protecting wildlife sometimes requires controlling dog populations, which brings them into direct conflict with animal rights advocates who oppose lethal methods. And that leads to the central dilemma of the street dog crisis. Everyone agrees the situation is tragic. No one agrees on the solution. Animal rights groups generally advocate sterilization, vaccination, and adoption programs. These approaches are humane and effective, but only if implemented at massive scale and sustained over many years. Many developing countries simply lack the resources to maintain such programs indefinitely. Public health officials sometimes argue for stricter control measures, including euthanasia in extreme cases. This approach may reduce populations quickly, but often triggers international outrage. Meanwhile, ordinary residents are left dealing with the everyday consequences. Barking packs at night, which I see this in Vietnam, these dogs be barking. Garbage scattered across streets, occasional bites, and the constant sight of animals living on the edge of survival. There's also an uncomfortable truth about street dogs that rarely appears in viral rescue videos. Life on the street is brutal. Puppies die frequently from disease or starvation. Injuries go untreated. Parasites are common. Vehicles kill thousands of dogs per year. Even well-meaning tourists who feed stray animals can unintentionally sustain populations that continue reproducing without veterinary care. In other words, leaving dogs on the streets is not necessarily compassionate. It's often just neglect disguised as tolerance. At the same time, mass culling campaigns create their own moral nightmare. Images of dogs being rounded up and euthanized spark outrage across the globe. Social media amplifies the emotional response, often without acknowledging the complexity of the problem. So countries remain stuck in a kind of permanent stalemate. Dogs keep breeding, cities keep expanding, and the numbers of animals living between the cracks of human society continues to grow. Here in Vietnam, the situation reflects that same global contradiction. Some dogs are beloved neighborhood companions. There's dogs I see every day that, they recognize me walking down the street, and they come up to me to greet me, and it's just amazing to see in a way. But then, obviously in a way, I feel very sad about, their realities. But, other dogs are working animals guarding homes and businesses. Some wander the streets without any clear owner at all. They've adapted to the city life in ways that are both impressive and heartbreaking. They navigate traffic, find food, and survive in environments that were never designed for them. By the way, to see these dogs cross the street, they're better than me. The way they can just navigate crossing a busy street. And in Southeast Asia, people don't really, stop. They just keep going. You have to really yield to them. And it's impressive to see these dogs work the traffic scene. They're amazing. Watching these dogs, it kind of forces you to think about something deeper. Dogs evolved alongside humans. For tens of thousands of years, we've shaped their behavior, their bodies, and even their emotional instincts. They learn to read human faces better than almost any other animal. They become our hunters, our guards, and our companions. And yet today, hundreds of millions of them are essentially abandoned. Folks, I said hundreds of millions of dogs. That's crazy. This isn't because people hate dogs, but it's because modern societies, we don't quite know what to do with them. We don't really know. It's a big problem. In wealthy countries, the solution has been clear. Strict ownership laws, widespread sterilization, licensing, and cultural norms that treat dogs as household pets. But those systems require infrastructure, money, and public consensus. In much of the world, those conditions simply don't exist yet. So the dogs remain, sleeping under market stalls, wandering alongside highways, living lives that are neither fully wild nor fully domestic. Until society figures out how to reconcile compassion with responsibility, the global street dog crisis will continue quietly unfolding in the background of everyday life. Millions of animals, millions of humans, all sharing the same streets, and no one is entirely sure of what the future of their relationship is supposed to look like. I'm Curtis. See you next time.